Aloha! This is Instructional Design and Development, Part 3, Design Objectives. I'm Dr. Catherine P. Fulford, Professor, Learning Design and Technology, University of Hawaii at Manoa. And I'd like to give special thanks to my editor, Danon Scheme. What are design objectives? They are to communicate with the design team and the content experts what you intend to do with the lesson that you're creating. There is a direct link from the instructional analysis to the evaluation and the instruction. To learn more about the instructional analysis, please view Part 2. They are more focused than normal course objectives. They're focused specifically on different parts of the instructional analysis. These are later transformed into user-friendly learner objectives. As you learned in Part 1, objectives need to be observable, measurable, specific, and replicable. You start with your instructional hierarchy, and working from there, each behavior becomes a design objective, and from each of your design objectives becomes an evaluation item. Discrete objectives for design work contain the conditions of performance, or given what, the performance, do what, and the criteria, how much or how well. Let's look at this example. Identify weekly bulletins. Here's our objective. The learner will identify weekly bulletins, but it seems to be missing some parts. So how do we correct this? Okay, let's take a look at the correction. Now we have a condition, given examples, as well as a performance, identify the weekly bulletin that needs to be posted in a blog, and the criteria, the number 4. This implies that they will do it correctly. Going from our subskills to objectives, for every subskill box in the instructional analysis hierarchy, there should be one objective. If you need to write more objectives, you should break the subskill into several boxes. If several test items come from one subskill, you will also need more boxes. Here is another example. You see the word different kinds here? Now we have 2 objectives. So how do we correct this? Instead, we need to make 2 subskills and change our hierarchy. We now add a snorkel and a mask, as well as a view box. Okay, here's another example. Identify mobile advice. But now we've written 2 objectives. One includes a description, and the other includes a picture. These are actually 2 different types of skills. So how do we correct this? Let's look here. We've actually added another subskill. One is to define the mobile device, and the other is to identify mobile device. You really need both of these behaviors in this case. Our hierarchical order is important. Sometimes when you start to write objectives, you find that you have it incorrectly. So if one objective seems harder than the one above it, you may have the boxes in the wrong order. You may need to change the hierarchical order of your boxes. Let's have an example. You see here at the bottom we have arranged books by call number. Now we start to write our objectives, which are usually done in a chart like this. But when you start to look at those and you realize the 2 below are actually important to do before you arrange the books by call number, you actually have to know how to sort them. When you read this chart, you should actually have the most difficult ones at the bottom. But on the hierarchy, you have the most difficult ones at the top. So in this case, arrange is more difficult than sorting. Sorting is a subskill to arranging. We also need to look at is whether the objective directly parallels or matches the behavior in the subskill. Let's take a look. Over here in our subskill we have the word discriminate, and it is an entry behavior. But in the objective we have 4 definitions. That definitely does not match. So how do we correct this? Instead, we should use the word define when we're talking about definitions. Note that entry behaviors can actually be above the discrimination level. It doesn't matter what level you use. Entry behaviors are any of the subskills that the learners already have. Next, we need to make sure they're measurable. Let's take a look. All right, we have the word calculate and will learn. Will learn does not seem very measurable. Can I see somebody learning? That's pretty hard. I can't see what they're doing. Let's see how we can fix that. Okay, calculate. Look, we actually can use the verb we already have in our subskill. It helps you make an easy objective. Let's now look at the domain of learning. Does the objective reflect the correct domain of learning? There are certain words that we tend to use for each domain. Let's look. Classify, choose. They don't seem to match. Classify would indicate that it's an intellectual skill, while choose would indicate that it's in the affective domain, or it's an attitude. How can we correct this? Okay, let's look at it now. Classify the music into categories, and we will sort them. Sorting is a form of classifying, so that would be fine. You could also easily use the word classify. If you're trying to reach a higher order level in your intellectual skills, the terminal objectives should be at the level of problem solving. These objectives usually reflect a more difficult and complex task. They should reflect the culmination of the combined rules. In that case, you must write an objective and test or evaluation item for it. Many people think they don't need to because they've already had those combined skills, but you want to see all of the skills used together for that terminal objective. Let's take a look. Here we have a terminal objective. Generate a strategy to select positions and activities to treat or prevent back pain. And we have some of our subskills shown. If we look at these two rules and then look at our objectives, what we find is that those are the last two behaviors that have objectives written for them. So that's incorrect. They're at the classify level and only asking people to label positions. Still pretty high, but not as high as we were trying to attempt in our terminal objective. So let's correct this. Here instead, we have a terminal objective that says generate a strategy to select positions and activities to treat or prevent back pain. That's our terminal objective. So instead, we have a higher order objective that implies that our evaluation will be higher order. Given 3 scenarios, the student will analyze and generate the appropriate strategies to prevent back pain. This is much better. Here's an objective checklist that I created. Okay, let's look at our subskill on the left. Analyze the design elements in instructional slides. Our objective, given 4 design elements, the students will identify which design element is needed to create an effective, readable electronic presentation. So this is incorrect. It's not parallel. In other words, our 2 verbs don't match, and it's at the incorrect level. The subskill implies that we are at the terminal objective level, whereas our objective is only at the concept level. So if we were to rewrite the subskill, we might write identify the right design element for an effective readable electronic presentation, and then it would now be parallel. However, if we were trying to write an objective for the terminal objective, this would be better. Given 4 slides, write a paragraph with at least 4 sentences analyzing the elements and describing what is needed to create an effective readable electronic presentation. Much better. That's the end of this presentation. Here are some references for your further study. I hope you will join us for the next part of the series. Aloha.